The latest, fourth indictment against Trump is truly unlike anything charged against him. It accuses Trump of operating a mafia-like syndicate to win the 2020 election. But can they make it stick to Teflon Don? Welcome to America Uncovered. I'm Chris Chappell. It's a universal law. For every Biden-related scandal, there must be an equal or greater Trump-related scandal. That theory was first discovered by Sir Isaac Fox Newston. Trump has been indicted for a fourth time, and it has become surreally routine. Trump's fourth indictment comes after a 2.5-year investigation conducted by Georgia's Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. It claims that Trump and his co-conspirators refused to accept that Trump lost, and they knowingly and willfully joined a conspiracy to unlawfully change the outcome of the election in favor of Trump. If you see a bit of a contradiction there, you're not alone. I'll come back to that. It goes on to say that conspiracy contained a common plan and purpose to commit 2 or more acts of racketeering activity across 7 states, including Georgia and the District of Columbia. As a result, Trump has 13 new charges under his belt, giving him a total of 91 charges across 4 indictments. Just 8 more until he can come out with the Orange Album and rap about having 99 charges. In some ways, this indictment is similar to the last one from Special Counsel Jack Smith. It too centers around Trump's behavior surrounding the 2020 election and attempts to prove that Trump lied. But there is a difference. According to Axios, Willis has unveiled the most sprawling and complex criminal case against former President Trump. Even more complex than the usual charge against him, Orange Man Bad. And the Georgia indictment takes a vastly different approach from Smith's. Where Smith's indictment focused on charging Trump with a very narrow range of criminal accusations to make the indictment go as swiftly as possible, Willis's indictment does the opposite. It not only charges Trump, but also 18 co-conspirators alongside Trump, including former New York Governor Rudy Giuliani. It's no wonder then that Willis's indictment, at 98 pages, is more than twice the size of Smith's. I bet Smith has indictment envy. So why did Willis choose to make this indictment so complex with so many people? Well, the thrust of the Georgia indictment is Georgia's version of the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organizations, or RICO Act. Georgia's RICO statute is based on the Federal RICO Act passed in 1970. The Federal RICO statute allows prosecutors to go after organized crime like the mafia, who'd often keep their hands clean through shell companies and underlings doing the dirty work. The law does not require prosecutors to prove that defendants directly engaged in criminal activity, just that they were a part of a larger organization that did. In effect, it lets prosecutors combine different, seemingly disconnected crimes if they believe these are committed as part of one overall enterprise. In other words, organized crime. State governments like Georgia have used RICO against more than just the mafia. Before Trump, Willis used RICO to target teachers in an Atlanta cheating scandal, as well as the rapper Young Thug, who for all we know could be a featured rapper in Trump's new hit album. Finally, a collab between young and really old Thug. What all these cases have in common is that they were charged with operating criminal enterprises. In order to successfully charge Trump and his co-conspirators of violating RICO, Willis must prove that there's an enterprise and a pattern of racketeering activity. And that's what her indictment sets out to do. I'll tell you how after the break. Welcome back. Fani Willis's Georgia indictment argues that Trump and others conspired together in an enterprise to create a pattern of racketeering activity. It says Trump and his 18 co-conspirators and 13 other unindicted individuals constituted a criminal organization for a common purpose of achieving the objectives of the enterprise, that being Trump's 2020 re-election. An organization of shady individuals doing shady things to try and stay in power? So does that mean Congress is a criminal organization? Under Georgia's RICO statute, racketeering activity means to commit, to attempt to commit, or to solicit, coerce, or intimidate another person to commit any crime which is chargeable by indictment. The Georgia indictment alleges that Trump and his co-conspirators fit the bill by listing alleged acts, including making false statements, impersonating a public officer, filing false documents, trespassing computer voting machines, conspiracy to defraud the state, and more. Proof of a pattern of racketeering requires that perpetrators engaged in at least 2 acts of racketeering activity with the same or similar intents. Some call this indictment ingenious. Some on the left, that is. Those on the right call it something I can't say without being demonetized. One opinion piece says, in using RICO, Willis accuses Trump of functioning like a gang leader overseeing a theft ring, except instead of stealing cash or cars, he and his allies are accused of attempting to steal the Georgia presidential election results. This could, in theory, make it easier to charge Trump with committing a crime. Prosecutors wouldn't necessarily have to prove that Trump himself personally broke the law, but only that he knowingly coordinated with others who did as part of a criminal enterprise. And if you're wondering, wait, so does that mean presidents can be held accountable for drone bombing citizens even though they're not the ones who pulled the trigger? No. There's a difference, and that difference is different, I guess. This could also help put pressure on co-conspirators to turn against Trump with evidence that could lead to Trump's prosecution. Trump critics love this, mostly because they now have an excuse to compare Trump to the mafia. He went from Donnie Trump to Donnie Brasco. But does this indictment actually hold water? More after the break. Welcome back. Georgia's indictment accuses Trump and 18 co-conspirators of operating a criminal enterprise towards a common criminal purpose in violation of Georgia's RICO statute. Now, I'll leave a link in the description below so that you can see Georgia's indictment for yourself. But is there anything to it? Well, let's just say that the indictment reads like a board full of Post-it notes of all the things that could possibly stick to prove that Trump and his co-conspirators operated a criminal enterprise. It lists 161 acts dating from November 4th, 2020 to September 15th, 2022, way after the 2020 election, to prove the manner and methods by which Trump's alleged criminal enterprise pursued its criminal objectives. I'll spare you the details, but here's what's most important. The best way to think about Georgia's sprawling indictment against Donald Trump and his allies is that it's a case about lies. It's about lying, conspiring to lie, and attempting to coax, coerce, and cajole others into lying. If Willis can prove that Trump or his co-conspirators knowingly and willfully lied to government officials about voter fraud and winning the 2020 election, then she could argue that Trump violated Georgia's state law, which prohibits false statements in writings, concealment of facts, and fraudulent documents in matters with jurisdiction of state or political subdivisions. This in turn could be used to argue that the lies were part of a criminal enterprise's machinations. Over half of the counts against Trump and his co-conspirators are focused on forgery and false statements. These especially make up a majority of the charges against Trump himself. But here's the problem. This strategy has exactly the same potential fatal flaw as Smith's third indictment. It needs to somehow prove that Donald Trump and his co-conspirators did not believe the election was fraudulent, which is where the contradiction comes in. If Trump and his co-conspirators refused to accept that Trump lost to the point where they literally did not believe it, how could they knowingly and willfully join a conspiracy that included making false statements? And how could anyone prove what they did or did not believe? Another problem with Georgia's indictment is that it gets into very murky waters when it comes to the First Amendment right of free speech and the ability to challenge elections, which itself isn't necessarily illegal. A lot of focus was on Trump and his co-conspirators' tweets. Each of the tweets listed in the indictment were allegedly overt acts in furtherance of conspiracy. Sadly, none of these allegedly conspiratorial tweets were his covfefe tweets, so we're still never going to get to the bottom of that mystery. These overt acts in furtherance of conspiracy include tweets where Trump claimed voter fraud and pressured top officials such as Georgia's Governor Brian Kemp, Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, and U.S. Vice President Mike Pence. They also include tweets calling for signature verification and calls for people to watch hearings broadcasts. Not even retweets are safe, such as Giuliani's retweet of a call to action to encourage voters to call their state senators and representatives to petition for a special session. Even things like making calls, reserving rooms in the Georgia state capitol, or even asking for contact information of a state official counted as evidence of conspiracy. These alone don't seem like crimes. Even 2016 Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton pushed for election recounts. That's where RICO comes in to prove that everything Trump and his co-conspirators did was for a criminal enterprise with a criminal purpose. But that might be a bit of a stretch. Trump and his 18 co-conspirators had the shared goal of getting Trump reelected, but it's hard to prove that they were really part of an ongoing, organized group working as a continuing unit towards a common purpose, especially through to 2022. The whole purpose of RICO is to prosecute being a member of a criminal enterprise, not particular crimes that an enterprise carries out. But it seems that Willis is trying to criminalize whatever Trump and his co-conspirators did by tying everything together through association with Trump. Some say this is the most compelling indictment yet, but others disagree, saying that alleging a RICO conspiracy makes the Georgia 2020 election case less credible. If you ask me, the second indictment is actually the most compelling. It has actual evidence that Trump may have compromised national security by mishandling classified documents and that he believed he was doing something illegal and tried to avoid consequences. But classified documents aren't sexy. It's hard not to see Georgia's indictment as a highly partisan move, especially when Willis said she wants the trial to start 1 week before Georgia's GOP primary, a mere 6 months from now. That is extremely unrealistic given how long it takes just to indict one person, let alone 19. This looks even more suspiciously partisan when you consider that the 13 charges against Trump were released and then deleted on the Georgia court website before the grand jurors were even finished meeting, and the way court staff dodged answering questions about it. Willis gave Trump and his 18 co-conspirators until August 25th to surrender, and Trump agreed to do so. If convicted, Trump would have a hard time dealing with it even if he were reelected as president, since this is a state and not a federal case, and only the State Board of Pardons and Paroles could make a pardon. Defendants who are found guilty of Georgia RICO charges face between 5 and 20 years in prison. But this could backfire on Willis. Trump is embracing the criminal cases against him as part of his 2024 campaign. And some voters are even more in favor of Trump if he's convicted. Perhaps he'll commemorate that with Young Thug. And unlike the Mafia, America Uncovered only gets support from viewers like you, making voluntary contributions on patreon.com/America Uncovered. Don't worry, it's not protection money. Just click on the orange button to get the America Uncovered goods. And if you want to go into more depth about Trump's previous indictment, click on this video. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.